Hi, I'm here with Dr. Allan Massie from NYU Langone Health, and he's here to talk with me about one of his most recent papers in the Transplantation Journal. Hi, Allan. How are you today?
Good morning, Macy. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about this paper that's about travel for transplantation?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So in the US, among the US waitlist, there are patients from time to time that are removed from the waitlist due to transplant abroad. And that really we don't know very much about what happens to those patients or even who they are. So we did a study using national registry data, and I should say that it was led by Kelly Terlizzi, who's a very talented analyst in her group, to look at who these patients are, who's getting removed from the waitlist, what have trends looked like over time, to try to understand this phenomenon. And unfortunately, we know very little about the outcomes of what happened to these patients, but we think the first step is trying to understand the patient population.
So you're saying these are patients that should have or could have gotten a transplant in the United States, but they leave the United States and they go to another country to get a transplant.
Well, that's right.
Okay.
And they're patients who are on the United States wait list. And now if you look at their demographics, about 65% of them are U.S. citizens, which is the majority, but that does mean that a very large proportion are citizens of a different country. And if you look at the racial demographics, it suggests that many of them might have ties to other countries, which is to say that about half of them are ethnically Asian, and many of those patients are getting transplanted in Asian countries, predominantly the Philippines, India, and China. Additionally, around 15% of the population is Hispanic, and they're more likely to get transplanted in Central and South America. So our sort of working hypothesis is that these are mostly including some of the U.S. citizens, that these are patients who have international ties, through family or immigration or some other kind of link.
You're a numbers guy. What do the numbers look like here about how many patients in the United States are actually leaving the country to go elsewhere for transplant?
Sure. Well, in our study, there were actually over 800 patients. So, I mean, that's out of a very small number on the wait list. So it is a relatively rare phenomenon, but it is something that's affecting hundreds of patients. And it peaked pre-COVID, and like so many things, changed during that time and decreased pretty rapidly through up to 2021, but then has started to climb again. I think in any given year, it's going to be like a 2-digit number of patients that's doing this.
Wow. And so what are the implications for this from your perspective?
Well, it's hard to say because we don't know the outcomes, and I think that's the most important thing. But I think one thing that patients may not be thinking when they're doing this is that transplantation is really a lifelong treatment. It's not a single day's procedure because you need to have your immunosuppression managed. You need to have complications managed by a competent team. Now, frankly, some of these might be patients. There is a population of patients that were in the United States who came for transplant. And so, they may have been listed here, also been listed in another country or what have you, and they might just be going back to the country of their residence, and it's fine. But I think particularly for patients whose plan is to get a transplant abroad and then come back to the United States, they might find that they're not able to access high quality care. My understanding from talking to our clinical colleagues is that transplant teams generally don't want to work with patients who weren't transplanted at that facility, or particularly if they left the wait list to go get transplanted in a different country. My understanding anecdotally is that most of these are kidney recipients. About 92% are were on the kidney list. And I understand that some of them are able to get some degree of care from nephrologists, but a nephrologist might not necessarily be the best person for giving immunosuppressive care. So, we don't have data to demonstrate bad outcomes, but I would have concerns that they're not getting the same level of care, and that it might ultimately lead to a shorter graft life.
Wow, what an amazing paper. Thanks for this work. What's the other way, right? Are there other patients that are coming to the United States for transplant? Have you studied that?
So that is actually a great question. It's partly linked to this. So I'm going to take a beat. So around 12% of the population that do get these transplants are people who are neither citizens nor residents of the United States, and 2/3 of them came to the United States for the purpose of having a transplant. And you and I know that our team at NYU sometimes evaluates patients who are coming from abroad for that purpose. And so there's some overlap in the populations. Now, having said that, I think the overall phenomenon of patients who come to the U.S. for transplant is a much broader population, and it's one that's very interesting. In many countries in the world, they might think that they're not able to get the best high-quality care. Sometimes people come with a donor candidate, as people come from around the world for medical treatment in general. The main thing that I would say about this population also is, first of all, that if they're planning on going back home, then they're going to be relying on local care for their immunosuppression and their post-transplant care, which might be of variable quality. But then the other thing is that we're not able to study them very well because the loss to follow-up is very high. And of course, we hope they're doing well, but we don't have a way to follow them and to understand at a population level what their outcome is.
So this is interesting, a little messy, and exciting because there's hopefully going to be a lot more data that you can study and write more really great papers for the journal on.
Well, we're always trying to figure out how we can best inform patients and providers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, this is Dr. Allan Massie from NYU Langone Health. He just wrote a fantastic paper for the Transplantation Journal, and so I thank him for being part of our transplantation podcast.
Thanks again, Macy.